Hi and welcome to a kaOs tournament that I have recorded, narrated and edited for you. So we have 3 different William and Lucas partner combination decks versus 1 Etali. That sounds rather interesting. Now, those of you who don't know who kaOs are, it's a tournament organization. The match we're going to watch actually took place that specific time. It's a European time zone tournament. But if you're interested in actually playing some online webcam tournaments, there are some other time zone options as well. Link in the description below of this video for this place, where you can scroll around for various different upcoming possible events. For example, this one, Twin Flame, with a prize money of 1024 USD dollars if they reach 120 participants. Now let's take a look at the deck lists. We have Death Magic, no Hullbreaker Horror, but he is playing Ad Nauseam. You usually play Hullbreaker Horror together with Will the Wise because you can, if you're able to generate infinite mana, you can bounce him infinitely and basically draw your entire deck from that, which is one of the big reasons why you kinda mess with this commander to begin with, because it's giving you some more potential options. But other than that, it looks pretty clean. Typical Grixis stuff with some white splashes for like Blind Obedience and Silence and Grand Abolisher, Containment Priest, and Archivist of Ogma and Draenei Magistrate, and Delny Streetwise Lookout. Pretty good with Will the Wise actually. Then we have T Dynamite's decklist version, kinda similar. Here we do have the Hullbreaker Horror, and he is actually playing Ad Nauseam as well. Very brave. Other than that, it looks kinda identical. No Draenei Magistrate and no Containment Priest. And no Blind Obedience either in this version. And the third and last, Will the Wise and Bjorna, or Bjorna and Vernog, lose neutral, who is playing Teferi, Displacer Kitten, and let's look at Mox Amber, which is kinda good with the commanders because they come into play quite easily. He's also playing Mox Opal, and of course you can make infinite with any of these zero-costing ritual rocks like Mana Rock together with your Displacer Kitten and Teferi. Dockside, Displacer Kitten and Vernog or Will is actually kinda cool, especially if you have Delny Streetwise Lookout as well. But also like Delny, Displacer Kitten, Dockside, that sounds pretty good. It is something of like a 3-card combo, because once you get a lot of mana from Dockside, you cast your commander, you generate clues, you draw cards, you flicker Vernog or Will, depending on which one you prefer, and you're digging through your deck, flickering Dockside, flickering Will, and potentially if you have Delny, getting extra value from that. We actually play Mayhem Devil in this build version. No Hullbreaker Horror, so they're kind of on 3 different variations. One is on Hullbreaker Horror, one is more on like Teferi Displacer Kitten, and the other one is on just Ad Nauseam basically. And then last we have the odd one out, Timujin 11, who is actually a player that is performing quite good in general. As I am someone who is calculating statistics, I have seen some performance from this player and he knows what he's doing. I know very little about this commander actually, or well, I do know how it works, but I'm not so certain exactly what specific cards you actually play. Now and then I do know that you're basically auto-including Food Chain, to basically recast Etali Infinite. But there are other tricks you can do that. For example, you should have, I'm guessing, Temur, there's Dockside obviously, but Temur's, there we go, Temur Sabertooth. So infinite mana with Dockside and Temur Sabertooth into infinite flickering or infinite returning and recasting Etali. It's a very strange build, or it's a kind of cool build, very cloney, by basically casting Etali, hoping to hit something like Cursed Mirror, get another Etali trigger, or potentially hit a Phantasmal Image or a Phyrexian Metamorph from one of your opponents and keep going with that Etali Storm. The commander actually has the potential of winning just once Etali actually just hits the battlefield. So it's kind of crazy, but it's also a little bit like luck orientated sometimes. Now with that, let's start the match. We have a pre-game effect of a Gemstone Caverns from the second player, Death Magic 37, and then the game begins. Underground Sea for an Imperial Seal, losing 2 life and searching the library. Finding a card and passing the turn. Marsh Flats, let's sacrifice that. Finding an Underground Sea. And then casting Lofo, passing the turn. The next Bjorn, Vermog or Lucas Will draws a card for turn, plays a command tower as a land drop, and then the turn goes to Etali. He plays a Wooded Foothills, uses it to find a taiga that he uses to cast a Ragavan and then passes. Bloodstained Mire as land drop into a Mystic Remora. Then he sacrifices the Bloodstained Mire, finding play Toe and passing as Death draws a card for turn. He did not gain any Lofo treasures this turn cycle, and he casts Lucas. And then the turn goes to the next Bjorna, Vernog or Lucas and Will's turn. Lucas is usually there for color identities, but it's kinda cool to have him in play when you have a Lofo, so you can sit and ping damage here and there. For example, killing that Ragavan could be kinda good. We are sacrificing an Arid Misa, and then using that to cast an Arcane Signet. That is a very good method for searching his library, making sure that no one is seeing the cards that he's searching through. The land he finds with the Arid Misa is a Tundra. The turn is passed and Ragavan goes to combat at the starting player, the Lucis Neutral, who flips into an exotic orchard, giving a treasure token to the Ragavan. Then he plays a Gaia's Cradle as a land drop, taps the cradle for 1 green, casting a Mana Vault, giving a card draw to the Mystic Remora. And then he casts a Treasonous Ogre, giving a treasure to the Lofo, the Death Magic 37, the second player in turn order. Treasonous Ogre is a great card for Etali as it's gonna help him cast Etali, paying life down to 21 to cast a Hellkite Cursor. This is not Etali. When Hellkite Cursor enters the battlefield, you may put a commander you own from the command zone onto the battlefield. It gains haste. Return it to command zone at the beginning of your next end step. This is actually a perfect tech for Etali. So he's going to put Etali into play, but then Etali will go back eventually to the command zone without really increasing commander attacks, which is perfect because you'd rather have him in the command zone. We're flipping a Desperate Ritual, we're flipping an Archivist of Ogma, a Simian Spirit Guide, and a Deadly Rollick. Some pretty good, decent hits. So he's going to cast the Archivist of Ogma. This is a creature, so it does not generate a Mystic Remora trigger. The Etali Timujin is then casting Simian Spirit Guide as well. This is also a creature that does not generate a trigger. Now, Simian Spirit Guide doesn't really do anything for him, but well, a creature is always a creature. He also casts his Desperate Ritual. You can see his free red mana there. He uses Deadly Rollick to exile his own commander, and then casts the commander using Treasonous Ogre and the mana from the Desperate Ritual, creating a second Etali trigger, flipping into a Worldly Tutor, a gamble, a Rhystic Study, and I actually don't know what this card here is from Death. Oh, it's an instant. It's the Destroy Target Creature, Planeswalker Enchantment something, a white card. It's a spot removal basically that he got from Death with his Etali. He's creating his stack with a spot removal first and Rhystic Study, gamble third and Worldly Tutor last, giving some card draw to the Mystic Remora here. So he casts his Rhystic Study, then he's trying to resolve a gamble, searching his library for a creature, or any card basically. I am guessing he's going to grab a form of clone effects for his Etali. I can see that Jeska's Will is in his deck. He did not grab the Jeska's Will. Jeska's Will would have been potentially quite good considering the amount of cards that Lucis Neutral currently have in his hand because of his Mystic Remora, and then he would also exile the card he finds with Worldly Tutor. Regardless, he did not take that as I saw that Jeska's Will was still in his library post-shuffling. He is going to randomize among 4 cards in his hand, and a die is rolling number 1, flipping a Food Chain to the graveyard. That was probably the card he actually found with his gamble. And then Worldly Tutor will resolve. I think he could have won here, depending on what he would have found with his... depending on what he has in his hand, he could have won here, I think. Except that the Food Chain did get discarded by gamble, which was very sad for him. But if he gets a Food Chain in play and then resolves a Worldly Tutor, he basically wins the match if he's able to recast his commander, which is very easy with all the creatures he have in play together with a Food Chain. Then basically finding a creature that you can loop infinitely with Food Chain and then cast his commander infinitely. But as that failed, he is finding I think that's an Eternal Witness that goes to the top of his library. And then with a pretty impressive board state, he is passing the turn to the starting player's turn 3. Gruul Etali is putting some pretty dominating presence here. I mean, he's basically threatening to win next turn, casting Eternal Witness, grabbing Food Chain from the graveyard, casting Food Chain, and from that point, most likely winning here. We're casting a Mana Crypt, giving a Heuristic Study trigger, and a card draw for Etali, drawing what he searched for. Tundra, land drop. We are discarding to hand size. It looks like a Displacer Kitten, a Mystical Tutor, and potentially a Dark Ritual. And then he passes the turn to Death, who draws a card for turn, untaps, and then for 1 mana, Gamble. He is currently sitting with 4 cards in his hand. With Gamble, it will go up to 5. I have to give some cred to Timujin here. As you can see, he has been very good at displaying his entire board state. This is an experienced Etali player, as you're going to steal some random stuff from your opponents. But as you can see, he's found correct cards for everything he's stolen. So he has that Simian Spirit Guide, he has the Archivist of Ogma, and a Heuristic Study version. Just having a pile of cards next to you is very good when you're playing webcam like this on Discords and Spell Table. Death finds a card. A die is being rolled, revealing a number 5, which is discarding a Dockside Extortionist. Which was probably what we found with the gamble here. Wow, the gambles have been kinda terrible this game so far. But post gamble we're casting a Mana Vault, generating another treasure with his Lofo, tapping the Mana Vault, using 1 treasure, to cast a Wishclaw Talisman. Use the remaining 1 of the mana from the Mana Vault and activate the Wishclaw Talisman, giving it to lose neutral, as he's now writing a token Wishclaw Talisman. As Death is searching his library, Archivist of Ogma triggers, and Timujin, the Etali player, draws a card and gains a life. Finding a card. Then he uses the remaining treasures and the floating mana to cast a Phantasmal Image. Is this going to just become an Etali? But in response to this, we have a Mind Break Trap on the Phantasmal Image, exiling the thing. So no Etali from the Death player. And the turn goes to T Dynamite. He plays a Volcanic Island as a land drop, and then a Flesh Duplicate. Second copy in attempt. Flesh Duplicate becomes a copy of Treasonous Ogre, which means he can pay life to generate red mana, which means he can climb up to the magical count of 5 mana, basically gaining the free colorless by paying 9 life, to cast Ad Nauseam using the Command Tower and Arcane Signet for the 2 black, giving a card draw to the Heuristic Study, the Etali's Heuristic Study. In response, we have a Flusterstorm from Lose Neutral on the Ad Nauseam, stopping the Ad Nauseam from resolving, sending it to the graveyard. And a card draw trigger for the Heuristic Study. And the turn goes to Etali, the gruul player, who begins by untapping and then drawing a card. From his Heuristic Study that he's stolen, he has a bunch of cards in his hand. I think I can see a Tamer Sabertooth there. Landrop, Windswept Heath, Mox Diamond, pitching Wooded Foothills to the Mox Diamond, tapping Cradle for 6 green mana total, and then Jeska's Will, gaining 4 red mana. You can see the die there with a 4 total on it. That is next to the Gaia's Cradle, flipping into Imperial Recruiter. I actually have no idea what the cards are behind Imperial Recruiter, but I guess we will see if he starts casting them. But with Imperial Recruiter he could potentially get a Dockside Extortionist to his hand. We're casting a Seating Song, then another Pyretic Ritual, and then the Eternal Witness to retake the Food Chain from his graveyard back to his hand. And then he's trying to cast the Food Chain. People seem to be revealing their hands and drawing cards to see what they would potentially get, so I'm guessing it's just GG's over Etali, the gruul player wins. So what he can do here is use Imperial Recruiter to find Squeedy Immortal with power 2, which means he can find it with the Imperial Recruiter. Then cast the Squeedy Immortal with some Food Chain mana by sacrificing, for example, Simian Spirit Guide, and then with Squeedy Immortal and Food Chain, he can generate infinite Food Chain mana. The can be used to cast creatures, then exile his commander with Food Chain, and then cast his commander, the Etali, infinitely until he's basically cast each opponent's all 3 decks forever. GG's! Timujin wins.